हेलो एवरीवन, अ वेरी वॉर्म वेलकम टू म्यूजिल आईएएस। मेरा नाम है मोहित कुमार चौहान और आज हम पढ़ेंगे क्लास 6 एनसीईआरटी हिस्ट्री का 5th चैप्टर। एंड द नेम ऑफ द 5th चैप्टर इज व्हाट बुक्स एंड बरियल्स टेल अस। In this chapter we will learn about the findings which were made by archaeologists by the books of this period and the burials by the people after their death. First we will see about the books. One of the oldest books in the world which were known of this period was Vedas. And there were 4 Vedas which were Rig Veda, Sam Veda, Yajur Veda and Atharva Veda. And the oldest one of these Vedas was Rig Veda, which is the oldest Veda and which was composed almost 3500 years ago. And this Rig Veda include more than 1000 hymns which were also known as suktas or well said. And there were 3 important gods which were specially important during the time of Rig Veda. First is Agni, which is a god of fire. Second is Indra, who is a warrior god. And the third one is Soma. Soma is a special drink which was prepared from a special plant. And these hymns of Rig Veda were composed by sages or rishis, and these were taught by the priest only. Most of these were composed, taught and learnt by men, and some of these were composed by women. The Rig Veda was written in the old or Vedic Sanskrit. Vedic Sanskrit is different from the Sanskrit which we learn today in our schools. The Rig Veda was recited and heard rather than read. जैसे कि हम आजकल देखते हैं कि वी यूज टू स्टडी द थिंग्स विच वर इन रिटन फॉर्म, बट अर्लियर पीपल हैव लर्न दीज ऋग्वेदास थ्रू रिसाइटेशंस ओनली एंड दे डोंट यूज द राइटिंग्स. It was written down several centuries after it was first composed, and it was printed less than 200 years ago. Here you can see this is the Vedic Sanskrit. As we are talking about Sanskrit, the Sanskrit belongs to a family which is Indo-European, and there were many other Indian languages which belongs to Indian-European languages, and these are Assamese, Gujarati, Hindi, Kashmiri and Sindhi. And there are many other European language which were also the offshoot of Indian European language, and these were English, French, German, Greek, Italian and Spanish. Remember, Russian is not the Indo-European language. Sometimes the examiner may confuse with the Russian language. And how do we found that these language belong to the same family? As these language have many of the common things in them. As Mat is a Sanskrit word, Ma is a Hindi word and Mother is a English word. You can see there is something common in them. And there are many other languages which were used in the subcontinent, and these languages belongs to the different family. And these are like the language of Northeast was of Tibeto-Burman family. The languages like Tamil, Telugu, Kannada and Malayalam belongs to the Dravidian family. And the languages of Jharkhand and the parts of central India belongs to the Austro-Asiatic family. Now we will know how the historians study about the Rig Veda. The historians study and examine the written sources of that period. Many of these sources were written in the form of dialogue. As one of the example we see here, this is a page of manuscript of Rig Veda which was written on a bark of a birch tree which was found in Kashmir, and this was written almost 150 years ago. It was also used to prepare one of the earliest printed text of Rig Veda. आप जो यहाँ पे देख रहे हैं, this is a dialogue between Vishwamitra, which is a sage of that time, and 2 rivers, Bias and Satluj, which were worshipped as the goddesses. And what do we find about cattle, horses and chariots in the Rig Vedas? There were prayers in the Rig Vedas for cattle, children and horses. During this period, the horses were captured and were attached to the chariot to fight the battles. And the battles were fought to capture cattle and lands, as these were important for pastures, water, and the peoples were captured to be used as slaves. And these wealth which were obtained from the battles was used by the leaders for the people to give to the priest and for sacrifices and yajnas. These sacrifices and yajnas were performed for the gods and goddesses, and these sacrifices may include ghee, grains, and in some cases animals also. As we were talking about wars, most men took part in these wars. There were no regular armies during this period. We will see in the later chapters that during the period of Janpadas and Mahajanpadas, the rulers will start keeping their regular armies. But during the Rigvedic period, there were no regular armies, and there were assemblies to discuss matter of war and peace. And during this period, the people also choose their leaders who were often brave and skillful warriors. Now let's see how the people were described during this period. There were many ways of describing people in terms of their work, their language, and their places, like what kind of work they do, what kind of language they speak, and at what places they live, and what are the cultural practices which were followed by them. And there are words which are used in the Rig Vedas to describe the people of this time period. And there are many groups which are described in terms of their work. The first is priest, or you can say Brahmins, which are described by their practices or performance of various kind of rituals. During this period, the priests used to perform various kind of rituals for kings and for gods. The other group which was described on their work was Rajas. And these Rajas are not like later ones which we will see during the period of Janpadas and Mahajanpadas. These Rajas do not have their capital cities. There were no palaces, no regular armies with them. They don't used to collect tax on regular basis, and many of the times their sons did not automatically succeed the father as Rajas. And there were other words to describe the people which were mentioned in Rig Vedas, like Jana. Jana, this word we also use in the today's time. And there is Vish, also known as Vishya, and there were several Vish which were mentioned by the name, that is Puruvish, Bharatavish, and Yaduvish. There is one word called Aryas. These Aryas called themselves composers of hymns or who perform sacrifices, and there are other Dasas and Dasyus who did not perform sacrifices and spoke different languages from Aryas. Later, these Dasas and the female version Dasis came to mean slaves who were captured in wars, and these slaves were made to do any work which were ordered by the rulers. And the place of composition of these Rig Vedas is in northwest region of the subcontinent. During this period, we have also found the presence of megalith. Megalith literally means big stones, where mega means big and liths means stone. These megaliths were carefully arranged by the people to mark the burial sites, and this practice was began around 3000 years ago, which was prevalent throughout the Deccan region, South India, and Northeast and Kashmir. These burials are often underground, and sometimes these can be seen on surfaces. As you can see here, this is an underground megalith site or underground megalith burial. This type of megalith is known as cyst, and some of them have portholes, as you can see here, and these portholes are also used as an entrance to place the people inside the burial. Here you can also see the single large stones burial which can be seen on the surface. There are many important megalithic sites, and some of them are Brahmgiri and Adichanallur. And all these sites have some common features, as the dead were buried with distinctive pots which were called black and red ware. These questions regularly came in exam, like black and red ware pottery belongs to which period? And the answer is megalithic period. There were also evidences of skeleton of horses, horse equipments, and ornaments of stone and gold. As you can see here, horse equipment which were found with the dead bodies and burials. There were many other equipments which were found beside the dead bodies were axes and daggers. these were the tools and weapons which were made of iron. These burials also suggest the social differences which were prevalent during this period, as more objects are found in one grave than in another. There is an example at Brahmgiri where one skeleton was buried with 33 gold beads, 2 stone beads, 4 copper bangles, and 1 conch shell. And there are other skeletons which have only a few pots. This suggests that the differences of status was also prevalent during this time, as some were rich and other were poor, some were chief and other were followers. And there are many burial sites which were meant for certain families, as these site contains more than one skeleton. People belong to the same family were buried in the same burial site over the period of time. As we have seen the potholes earlier, these bodies were brought through these potholes inside the burial sites. There is a special burial at Inamgaon. Inamgaon is a village over the river God, which is a tributary of Bhima. And this place was occupied between 3600 years ago to 2700 years ago. Here we found the graves of the adults, and mostly these burials were made where the bodies were kept in the position where their head was towards the north and legs were towards the south. And sometimes these burials were made within the houses. And we also found the presence of big vases where the food and water was kept with the buried person. और हमें यहाँ पे एक साइट मिली है where one man was buried in a large 4-legged clay jar in a courtyard of a 5-roomed house, and this house also had a granary, and the body was placed in a cross-legged position. अब हम जान लेते हैं what were the occupations which were carried out by the peoples of Inamgaon. The archaeologists have found that the seeds of wheat, barley, rice, pulses, millet, peas, and sesame were found in the Inamgaon. The bones of the animals bearing cut mark on them. This shows that people must have used these animals as their food. And these animals include cattle, buffalo, goat, sheep, sambar, spotted deer, black bucks, antelopes, hares, crab, and fishes. These people must be the Chinese of earliest times. And there is evidence that fruits such as bear, amla, jamun, dates, and berries were also collected by these peoples. So that's all for today. In the next chapters, we will learn about the earliest kings and the kingdoms, and we will keep learning the history and जानते रहेंगे हिस्ट्री के ऐसे ही इंटरेस्टिंग फैक्ट्स. Thank you for choosing MUSE IAS and have a great day.